si le monde était beau et des claviers et un gage, qui peut la vivre debout, ou bien la vivre à genoux, vraiment rien de découragement. Vraiment rien de découragement. Hey, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Claudia Brown. I am Adjunct Professor of French here at Rosemont. Welcome to the second annual Love of Language Forum at Rosemont College. Thanks to you all for logging in. And we may even have some European guests who are tuning in at 10 p.m. their time. So we thank them for making that sacrifice. This year, we are excited and honored to have with us Eleanor, or as I call her, as most people call her, Ellie Beardsley. She's the National Public Radio correspondent based in Paris, France. Ellie has been with NPR as a Paris correspondent since 2004. She's covered French and more recently other Francophone regions, their culture, society, politics, sports, economics, and gastronomy, among a host of other topics. Can't begin to list them all. So before moving to Paris to take this job, Ellie cut her teeth pitching freelance newspaper and radio stories from the Kosovo NATO bombing campaign, the Kosovo, where she was working for the United Nations mission. And this was just after the NATO bombing campaign of strongman Milosevic, and the province of Serbia became an international protectorate. So it was a really, really key time to be there. And she just happened to be there at that time. So she had these incredible human stories that she pitched to various major news outlets, print and radio, such as Christian Science Monitor, the Washington Post, and also the public radio show, The World. And that really got Ellie on the map as a journalist. Before that, she lived and worked in Washington, D.C. for 10 years. And that's where I met her, actually. She worked as a producer for the Washington News Bureau for the French TV station TF1. And I have to say, I so wanted her job when I met her. I met her because I was interviewing at TF1, and then we found out that there are no jobs available. She had the plum job. So anyway, then I kind of veered off to academia. Anyway, there's overlap. I think a lot of overlap between journalism and academia. So I haven't completely left journalism, and Ellie has not completely left academia. All right, so Ellie began learning French at the age of 11 when she would read French comic books, the French comic book series Astérix of Gaul with her father. Little did she know that she would end up one day making a living using French. To me, Ellie is the living proof that persistence and tenacity, along with strong engagement and great work, can get you exactly where you want to be. Ellie is a native of South Carolina and earned her BA in European history and French from Furman University in Greenville. Then her master's in international business from the University of South Carolina. The title of Ellie's talk today and subsequent conversation with me is Language and Culture, Opening the Doors to Your Future. We think that Ellie's remarks will be relevant not only to foreign language students, but also to international business, history, writing, communication students, and really everything in between, since her role as a reporter has taken her to many disparate places, historical and contemporary, high profile and ordinary. In describing her beat, as the journalists call it, Ellie will be speaking about the role of French language in her work. And we will make sure to make time for question and answer after Ellie and I are finished our conversation. I hope you can see that in the chat there. It says that you can start to write your name and your geographic location if you like. And any question that you have will be written in the chat, and I will field those questions. Okay, and then before I give Ellie the floor, as it were, I would like to thank Rosemont professors Tatiana Ripoll-Paez, chair of the language department, and Christine Hagedorn, discipline coordinator of the business department. They are the ones who conceived of the Love of Languages Forum in 2020. And they so captured the interest of Rosemont students, faculty, and staff, as well as other community members, that they filled Rotwood Theater here on campus nearly to capacity. Also, a big shout out to Kathy Smizer in marketing, who helped immeasurably with all of the tech and administrative aspects of getting this together, and also did wonderful publicity for us. So thank you, Kathy. Okay, our aim is to especially encourage foreign language students among our international business students at Rosemont, who may be contemplating careers abroad or with foreign companies. That is why Rosemont College Business Department is one of the co-sponsors of this event. And today's program is also made possible by the Rosemont Department of Languages, the Rosemont College Office of Postgraduate Success, Rosemont Student Chapter of the Association of Latino Professionals for America, as well as the Conwell Grant for Foreign Languages. We plan to continue this tradition, this annual tradition, in years to come, and hopefully include more Rosemont academic departments to sponsor it. So without further ado, here is Ellie.
Hello, everyone. Good evening, because it's, like Claudia said, 10 o'clock in Paris. Claudia, thank you for that very glowing and complimentary introduction. I'm very pleased and honored to be with you all. And, you know, actually, I want to tell you, in telling you how, you know, learning French and learning a foreign language has really shaped my life and career so much more than I even imagined, I'm going to start with a story. And it's actually not about France, it's about another country. And bear with me one moment while I try to share a couple pictures with you. Okay, so I'm going to take you to Tunisia. Can everyone see that? Mm-hmm. Okay, you see, here's Tunisia. Tunisia was a former French protectorate. It's across the Mediterranean. In 2011, there was a string of, it was known as the Arab Spring, of revolutions across the Arab world in Tunisia, Libya, Egypt. Some went better than others, but Tunisia started them off, and no one had any idea they were coming. And so here I was, it was 2011, I was working as a freelancer for NPR in Paris, and I was listening to the radio, and I would hear about these protests going on every night, these young people around the country in Tunisia. And I remember asking my editor, do we have anyone there? And he said, no, why don't you go? And I was like, me? Tunisia? I don't know the Arab world, I don't know Tunisia. I mean, and I said, well, yeah, why not? There was like 5 flights a day out of Paris. All the French went to Tunisia on vacation. So I got on a plane, and I just went. I heard the journalist there. I thought, do I need a visa? I don't know, but I need to go. I went. I arrived at the airport, and I thought, okay, I arrive, and you have to fill out a form. Why are you there? It says, what is your job? And I was just like, oh my God, what do I say? I'm a journalist. What if they put me in prison? I'm like, no, they couldn't do that. So I remember I wrote fixer, producer, translator, and I get up to the desk, and the guy takes my paper, and he's very stern looking, and he looks up at me and goes, are you a journalist? Mm-hmm. And I was like, go, this is the moment of truth. You know, I had my microphone in my bag. There was nothing. I said, yes. And he just broke into a smile, and he said, welcome to Tunisia. And like, I knew it was going to be great right then. So it started right away. So we drove into the city. I was in Tunis at the airport, and you see it here. This is the cult of personality. This is the dictator, Zine El Abidine Ben Ali. I'll never forget that name. So I go to the hotel. It's like, oh my God. And he's going to give a speech. We arrive, and he's going to give a speech. And so I grabbed a hotel waiter, and I said, please, can you translate for me? And so he translates, and you know, I don't even really know what I'm covering. He's like, I've understood you, you know? And so next thing I know, I go to bed that night, and I woke up the next morning to this rumbling. It was just, and what it was tens of thousands of people, Tunisians, marching down Boulevard Habib Bourguiba. He was the founding father of Tunisia when they got independence from France. And there are judges, there are lawyers, there are students, there are housewives. I mean, all walks of society. And it was just massive. And I ran out there with my microphone, and they had this big phrase, Ben Ali, dégage, dégage, which kind of means get the hell out. And so it was just unbelievable. I was interviewing everybody. Then comes, soon the riot police show up, the tear gas, people are running. I got totally tear gassed like I have never. I mean, we're banging on our hotel door and they've locked us out, and then they just let us in. I barely made it up to my room. I mean, I couldn't see. I mean, tears streaming down my face. Anyway, the dictator fled that day. So I end up, and the dictator fled, there's complete pandemonium. And what do? They closed the Tunisian airspace. They closed the airspace. Here's another picture I took. Liberté, démocratie, laïcité, that means secularism. It was a young people's revolution that spread on Facebook. They closed the airspace though, and there I was, the freelancer from NPR, covering the first Arab Spring Revolution. They couldn't even get their war correspondent in because the airspace was closed. And you know what? It was incredible. Because guess what? I could talk to everybody. Everybody spoke French. And so here I was in this incredible, for me, it was an exotic place. It was a foreign place. I would wake up in the hotel in the morning at 5 and hear the call to prayer, the muezzin ringing out. And I thought, oh my God, this is amazing that I'm here. But I had the keys to that society because I could literally just talk to everybody. And that's what I did for the next 10 days. And I mean, I covered it, and I've gone back 11 times since then. I went back for the first elections. I mean, I love that country. And so honestly, that could have never happened if I didn't speak French. And I was not expecting that. And that's really what a language can do for you. You might not, people used to say, why do you want to take French? Do you want to teach French? And I was like, no, I don't want to teach French. I didn't think I did, but I just knew that I wanted to speak it. Here is a guy that, I mean, everybody, the army was on the people's side. I mean, the dictator had fled. It was mostly jubilant. It wasn't like Syria, okay? And it was incredible. And today's Tunisia is a democracy. So it was just a wonderful, wonderful time. And that's what, a language can do. And I've just never forgotten that. Okay. Jumping back to France here. So I had just an incredible ride, never expected it. It's all because I spoke French. And because I had sort of dared and done something, but the language was key. So since then I have covered, I've been all over Europe. I've covered the migrant crisis, terrorist attacks in Paris, Brussels, London. I've been to Ukraine 3 times, covered the war there. Even Eastern Ukraine. I watched the city of Donetsk go from kind of a nice city to a completely destroyed battleground. I almost got, it was even scary at times. This is Paris though. That's my beat in Paris. And these guys are at the Sunday market. One of the things I love covering in France is the food. There's 250 street markets in Paris every week. This is one on Sunday. These guys like to drink rum. You see he's got his little rum glass there. I bought a chicken. They cut the feet and the heads off, and you're thinking, ew. But actually to people who eat fresh food like this, a chicken wrapped in cellophane in the freezer section of your refrigerator section of a grocery store is kind of yucky. This guy is serving up what's known as head cheese. And I was like, there's a place down the street from me. They won the triple world championship of head cheese. I'm like, what the heck is head cheese? Anyway, it is basically an entire pig's head, I think, except for the ears. He told me his secret recipe. And you basically boil it for like 3 days with all of these different spices and stuff. And it makes this sort of gelatinous loaf. It sounds horrible, doesn't it? It is delicious. So I did a story on him. Other things, this was a huge breaking news story. I want to say one of the biggest, this and the terrorist attacks in Paris. I think you recognize that's Notre Dame Cathedral, the 12th century Gothic cathedral in Paris caught fire. And I mean, that was insane. The tower had fallen by then. That's my picture. I stood on the banks with just, thousands of people watching it burn with just this panic. You're watching the water go on it, but why doesn't it go out? And everyone's just, and finally it got dark and people were kneeling, people were singing, people were praying. And that was an amazing story. Another thing I love covering in France is D-Day in Normandy. And Normandy is just a wonderful place, just the little villages. I swear it has not changed. The hedgerows are still there that you read about. It's not built up. It is so beautiful. And the beaches, the landing beaches, June 1994, the Allied landing, it's amazing. They still have the mulberry harbors on the beach. You can visit it, you can see it. Anyway, and so the big anniversaries are usually every 5 years. This was the 75th. And these are a bunch of guys from the Netherlands dressed as American GIs. And then these are French people who've come in their Jeep. So everybody has their retooled 1940s Jeeps or look like them. And they just come play, it's like a live history show for days. People just come there. It's absolutely wonderful. So that's just sort of an overview of some of the things I've covered. But the bottom line is, I have one more picture here. Sorry, I don't see sorry. I'm not very adept at Zoom. Okay, this is the last one. So the 75th anniversary, there was this guy, Ray Lambert. He was 95, so he was 20 when he landed, and he was a medic, and he saved like 20 men behind this rock. He landed on June 6th, and the town has named this rock for him. It's Ray's Rock, the little village behind. This is Omaha Beach, and every person he saved is written on here. So if you go to Omaha Beach, you can see this. This is Ray's Rock. And here we have Tom Brokaw, the famous American journalist who wrote about the World War II generation. What was that book? The Greatest Generation. The Greatest Generation, The Sacrifice. That war was clearly good versus evil. And there he was covering Ray as well. And I said, oh my God, I'm going to get a selfie with Tom Brokaw. So there I did. And that's basically my slideshow. So but I just want to say, I never knew I wanted to be a journalist until very late. I don't know why I didn't think about it. I majored in European history and French. But one constant in my life, I've done many different things and I don't regret anything, but the one sort of constant has been French, my desire to be fluent one day. I sometimes joke that it took me 25 years. I'm not trying to depress you guys. You do it faster, I promise. But there's always levels. So anyway, I was always working on my French. When I got out of college, I had gone abroad a little bit, but I didn't speak well enough. I really didn't want people to know that I had a double major in French because I didn't feel like I could speak it. So I was always taking classes at night or going to the French movies or going to the French hairdresser or the French restaurant, always working on it. And loved the music, loved everything. And who knew, I never knew that I would actually be living here and it would pay off to know all of those obscure facts, artists, everything that I was always obsessed by learning about French. But that's really been kind of the one constant. So I'm making a plug for languages in that. Anyway, that's just a short overview of what you can do with a language, and you never know where it's going to take you.
Thank you, Ellie. That was wonderful. Oh my gosh, so many adventures. I just wanted to, by the way, Ellie and I both have hearts symbolizing our love for France and for the French language and Francophone regions. It's Valentine's also, and we are expressing our love of all things French and Francophone. Okay, so we're gonna do a little conversation here, and then after that, we'll take your questions. I'm sure you all have lots of questions for Ellie. So Ellie, I know a little bit about you, but I wonder if you could tell us about your background and your upbringing. You're from South Carolina, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
And I know that NPR listeners love your southern accent. They always they comment on that. And
not all of them. I've gotten like hate mail, not hate mail, but like, oh, I hate her accent. But
well, I guess that's what you have to go through when you're in the limelight. But I've seen all positive. Okay, but anyway, so if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself and how then you got to French. I know you were encouraged by your father. Who was
Absolutely. So yeah, I grew up in South Carolina in basically the 70s and the 80s, Columbia, South Carolina. I was a product of busing, integration of the schools. So in the 7th grade, I was bused to schools and mostly, African-American neighborhoods. So I always was in very integrated schools, mostly Black because there was a lot of white flight at the time. it was very American. There was not much international influence. We watched Andy Griffith and the Brady Bunch and totally American upbringing. Later on, I would wish that I had, grown up bicultural and bilingual like my son. But in a way, I'm being a journalist. I'm really happy that I'm totally American. And now I feel like I know what Americans think, who they are, what moves them, what interests them. I really know. So, like you said, Claudia, I started studying French, I think around 11 with my father, who began reading Asterix the Gaul comic books with me. I don't know if you guys know Asterix the Gaul, but I have one here. Asterix is like, I want to compare him to Mickey Mouse for America, but it's even more so. I mean, this is the quintessential French comic book. It's known around the world. It's translated in like 140 languages. And the basic premise, I'm just going to show you really quickly, because Caesar actually defeated the Gallic chieftain Vercingetorix in 50 BC in France. Well, this comic book, it always opens with this. It says, all of Gaul has ceded to the Romans. All? No, there's one village that held out. And so the Gauls hold out against the Romans and they beat them up. How do they do it? Very quickly, they have a magic potion that makes them superhuman strong. So this is the character. You're going to see Asterix. I guarantee you. He's known around the world. Anyway, started reading Asterix with my dad. I have memories that I worked. My dad says I didn't work very hard, but whatever. It got into my head. And my parents took me to France when I was 12. And I also had the, luck of living in England twice when I was young, when I was 8 and 16, because my father was a history professor and he went on a sabbatical. So very early on, I saw Europe and I saw that different world, that huge world out there. And here I was coming from South Carolina in the 70s. And it was just, it was not like today where you can watch a Netflix series from another country. It wasn't like that. You were in your country and the world was, especially America was so insular. So that opened up a world. And since that time, I wanted to go back to Europe. I was intrigued. I was fascinated, but I was a real South Carolina girl.
Okay, that's great. And so what were your first impressions of France that when you first went there as a teenager?
Yeah, well, at 12. Well, first of all, Paris was amazing, but I guess the food was so unbelievable. Like I remember seeing, I'm coming from the US in the 1970s. We drank Kool-Aid, there was iceberg lettuce, hot dogs. We had very pedestrian meals. It wasn't, like today where you can go to health, forgetting the name of the store, but get all the really good cuisine from everywhere. I remember seeing cow's tongues at a market and I was like, oh my God, like the tongue, they're served brains, but not just that, the way people dress, the way, the women seem to be dressed so smartly. And I remember there was a time where women in America would wear their white tennis shoes with their work clothes and then change when they got to work. You never saw that in France then, but actually, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's a good thing, but you never saw it then. It seemed really different then. Everybody smoked in Paris. Nobody was fat. All the cliches kind of held, but everything seemed foreign. And actually, Claudia, I've probably forgotten about it because maybe I'm a little bit going native, and the world is shrinking, guys, because now everything is much more alike than it was. Because we all see each other. We're all online and, trends spread. So, it doesn't seem so different anymore. But in, 1976, when I first went as a 12-year-old, it was very different.
Mm-hmm. So did you face any difficulties, or what were the difficulties that you did face when you first came to Paris as a reporter, as an adult?
I've lived in France. Like I went on foreign study. So I think basically no, because I always wanted to come here. So I did go on foreign study though, and I was a sophomore in college, and I went for 3 months to Versailles, and I remember, and I stayed with a family, and I think my French was not very good. My spoken French was not good at all. And so I was a little nervous, and I had just had my first boyfriend at college. So I was a little bit homesick. So I kind of remember then being a little bit, I had a good time, but hanging out with my American girlfriends and not learning much French,
Mm-hmm.
On another stint, when I was in international business school, I was obsessed by French, and I would study French in the laundromat. I had an internship. When I was in international business school. I would go out to bars at night and just talk to people at the bars. I would study grammar in the laundromat. I was totally into it, but I don't think I ever, okay, maybe periods of homesickness, and way back when I was a sophomore, we wrote airmail letters. There was no internet, and you couldn't use anybody's phone. Nobody had cell phones; those didn't exist, and the phone was super expensive in France, so you never could really talk, and it was a different feeling. But I've never really faced hardship because it's always been a challenge, and I've always relished living here.
Mhm.
And the challenge of experiencing a new society, you don't know how everything works, you don't know where everything is, and you're learning every day. It's very exhilarating.
So it hasn't stopped being really enticing and interesting and exciting to you.
No, no, it hasn't, because I'll just, I have gotten used to a lot of things, and I'm like, oh, whoopee doo, that would be so. I would think that was so neat before, but still, things will still hit me. Just a really quick example: I was out the other night interviewing people because I had to do a story about the coronavirus, and they have these tents set out in front of the pharmacies, people getting tested. And I stopped a woman after she got tested, and she said, "Do you know how old I am?" And I said, "No." And she looked 78. She was like 90. She was in her 90s. I said, "Wow, you don't look it." I don't know. And so I said, "You lived the war." And so that always comes up. She said, "Yeah." And she she just told me this. She said, "Yeah, I remember my parents left Paris. We went to a little town, and the Nazis were there. And when they put the Nazi flag up over the town hall, I vomited."
Oh
And
my
I
God.
was just like, wow, this woman is telling me that. And I regretted I didn't get her number. But how many times you walk in, do you meet somebody, usually, I mean, in the US, who vomited when the Nazi flag went up when they were a little girl in there? So you're always coming into meeting people. I'm always meeting amazing people. Or when I go out into the little villages, and you see the way people live, it's just wonderful. And you know,
Yeah,
so I'm reminded every time how much I love it here.
that's wonderful.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give to students here at Rosemont or others that are going through a similar stage in their lives, contemplating going abroad, either for work or for study? Students are studying abroad with that are at Rosemont, hope to maybe do that in their junior year. What advice would you give them?
Well, I would say this: if you are learning a language, you are never wasting your time. I don't care if you're 30 years old waiting tables in some country because you want to learn the language. That is not a waste of your time. Learning a language is not just about learning another language so you could read a book. It opens up a whole culture, a whole people, a whole new set of values and a way of looking at the world. It broadens your it just cracks open your world. So you might, and it doesn't always have to be professional reasons. I continued on the French because I personally really loved it, and I thought, well, maybe I'd like to travel back and forth to France one day. Honestly, a language, it can enhance any career you have, whether you're a business person, a doctor, a teacher. Some posting somewhere or some business trip somewhere might come up, and you've got a little bit of a language that's going to put you there. And you can't speak every language, but people who speak just one foreign language, other people know that that person is open and that person is different. You look at a person who speaks another language, even if it's not the language, your native language, like say somebody, French person would meet an American who spoke German. But still, that American who spoke German would be seen as broader and more, it gives you a certain cachet to speak another language, and it really does open up a whole new world, and you never know where it can lead you. So I would say definitely take a language. You're not going to get fluent in 1 year, but you can always keep working on it, and even just having notions of that language could turn you in give you a new career twist, open up your life.
Mm-hmm. That's great. That's really great. I hope everybody is listening to that, because that's really great advice.
And I want to say one more thing. The European commissioner was speaking the other day. It's a German woman, Ursula von der Leyen. I mean, she's speaking in front of the European Parliament. Okay, they speak a lot of languages there, but I was just so impressed because she spoke in German, then she spoke in French, then she spoke in English, and of course, she's German, but it was impressive, and it's impressive, yeah.
Yeah, that's how I feel with Christine Lagarde too.
Yeah.
She's perfect English speaker, perfect French speaker. It's amazing. Okay, now I'm going to shift gears a little bit because I am always interested, I think you are too, in contemporary history of France, and also the interplay between the United States and France. Do you find, or have you found, that there is any vestiges of anti-Americanism in France today?
You know, it's funny. First of all, I know there's there's so many stereotypes about the French in America, and I'm just not really sure how they got started and fed, but the French are not anti-American. They're not. I mean, people in Paris love Americans. I mean, the French, honestly, I feel people, they love Americans. Or, you know, and even Trump, they want to talk about Trump. What do you think about Trump? Or and it's so no, I don't feel that I don't feel any anti-Americanism. And Tony Blinken is our new Secretary of State for in the Biden administration, and he went to my son's school. So I actually recently did a story about him. And one of his friends who was in school with him here said it was really hard in the 1970s because it was after the Vietnam War and there was a lot of anti-Americanism. And I remember thinking, wow, it's not like that anymore. And I guess when the lead up to the Iraq War, there was a horrible falling out between the US and France. But it's not like that anymore. And I think you're welcomed. I think tourists who come in big groups, they don't see like you'll have, buses of Chinese tourists who come, not anymore because nobody's traveling, but they come, and then the Chinese, they spit on the sidewalk. So you'll have tons of Chinese and they're spitting. And so you don't realize how you're affecting another culture. So, I think a lot of that is from like big masses of group travel and people are loud and, maybe from that. But actually, if you're polite to people and you smile, you will never be treated badly.
Mm-hmm. And so just so piggybacking off of that, I know living in France myself, that there are definite rules of etiquette that one needs to follow to be kind of accepted. And it doesn't seem to be to such a degree in the United States. And France is a much older country, and they have a history of being world leaders, millions of years, thousands of years ago. But I wonder what you think about these rules of etiquette and what might they be. I just wanted to give a plug for this book called The Bonjour Effect. I don't know if you can see this, but and it's a kind of a amateur sociological look at etiquette in France. And the authors, they're Canadian authors who did the field research in boutiques and shops in Paris and other places, mostly in Paris, found that most of the salespeople will not even answer your question if you just bolt into the store and say, where, even if you're in French and you say, could you tell me where such and such is, where I can find the black suits or whatever, the books or whatever. They almost, it's like a tacit requirement that you say bonjour madame, bonjour monsieur, and this is kind of what they call politesse in French, and that's what they found in this book, that French need to have this kind of reinforcement of these rules of etiquette. So what have you found, Ellie, about that?
Well, the bonjour thing, that is absolutely true, and it actually is like unbelievable. You have to say bonjour. In fact, but it's actually almost can be annoying because people, if you don't say bonjour, even if you say excusez-moi, like very politely, no, that's not good enough. They're going to say bonjour, and actually, it actually annoys me sometimes, to tell you the truth. But it actually is the golden word. If you learn one word to come to France, it is bonjour. You just say bonjour. You don't even have to say bonjour madame, bonjour monsieur. Just bonjour. It's true. And there, this is old Europe, and there are, like, for example, you hold doors for people here. I have literally noticed that people let doors slam in each other's face in America. I've had so many doors, they just clank back at you because they're not held for you. You do not wear your hat inside when you're a man. You take your hat off. And Americans like come over and they have their baseball hat, the ubiquitous baseball hat, and they wear it in restaurants. I mean, okay, I'm not even generalizing. It's true. I mean, you wouldn't see a French person probably wear their hat inside. And then you do say bonjour. And I'm always telling my son, you have to say bonjour, madame, if it's somebody who lives in our apartment building. So there are these sort of etiquettes that seems like we've kind of lost in America. I don't know if we ever had them, or it's just, it's like, I guess, the way society is here. So the bonjour thing is true. And it doesn't mean you have, I mean, people are still alike. You still have young kids who are not, but because here people kiss each other when you greet, not anymore because there's COVID, but literally you have to go up, not if you don't know them, but if you go to a party, you come in, you kiss everyone, bonjour, and you're kissing, and then you leave, you have to kiss them again. And it's actually exhausting. And I was kind of actually glad to see that go with COVID because it puts a lot of pressure, always kissing people. But there's these formalities that you kind of do follow here more than in the US where anything goes, you know?
Yeah. That's a good point. Okay, so what are your thoughts about the benefits? We talked a little bit about this, but both long-term and short-term of studying abroad, especially for undergraduates with a sufficient proficiency in the language, French in this case. So you studied abroad. I don't know
Yeah.
what you feel, long-term, you benefited from and in the short term.
Yeah, I just can't say enough for it. You know, I went 3 months abroad in my junior year and I lived in Versailles and I don't regret anything. It was great. But I kind of regretted I didn't come for a full year in Paris because I was still trying to get my French better. So I had a great time in Versailles, mostly hung out with my American girlfriends, did not learn a lot of French, but had a wonderful time. And I always said I remember we had these grammar books to do and we were taking the train, we were traveling every weekend. And literally we would ask people on the train, can you help me fill this in? And like these French people would be writing our papers for us. I am not kidding. It was like, anyway, but Lord, but it was still there, the desire. So I'm like, I'm going to come back. I'm going to come back. So I came back again in graduate school and I had an internship. And, it's just every time you come back, it's different. You build on your language and you learn more and more. And you don't just learn about the country you're in, you learn about geopolitical relations, you learn about everything. And when I worked in Kosovo, I went to Kosovo and I worked in the UN mission there. So it was the United Nations. There were people from, all over the world. I had friends from Germany, India, Britain, just everywhere. And I remember, I arrived there and I was in my 30s, late 30s. And I'm like, why didn't I know about this? The UN, in the unbelievable world of international jobs. And you have to speak a second language for the UN. So you need to have that second language. They will not look at you otherwise. And so it was just amazing. I was in Kosovo and there was young people, lawyers getting, experience and incredible jobs like, doing forensic work from mass graves, jobs that you can't get at home because the situation isn't there. And I just remember thinking, wow, this is amazing. I wish I'd have known about the UN and all of this, 10 years ago, but at least I found out about it. So living abroad, it just opens up so many opportunities and I've loved it every time I've done it. And everything builds on everything else. When I covered Ukraine, I felt like I knew Ukraine because I had lived in Kosovo. It's very similar. Felt like the Serbia area of Kosovo. I felt actually very comfortable in Eastern Ukraine, in all of Ukraine, because it felt like Kosovo. And so you build an experience and you meet more people and things open up. So I can't say enough for it. It's a great experience. Can you be homesick sometimes? Yes, I was that first time I went, but I have such fond memories and you make friendships and it's wonderful. It's a great thing to do.
Well, I want to discourage my French students from, getting a study abroad program in place because they are going to have their Parisian peers fill in their papers for them. I want to discourage that, but but it's another way to learn. What can you say? So, and then did you live with a French family?
I've lived with a French family. That was good. You'll learn French. I remember learning about French food. We drank wine at dinner. Learned a lot. It was great.
Yeah, that's great. I found the same thing from my experience. And then the last thing I wanted to ask you is that Rosemont students here are required to take at least 2 terms of a foreign language as part of the general education core curriculum. And some students see it just as a requirement. They have to get it over with, and they don't realize that it is a skill and a sensibility and a new way to see the world, as you mentioned before, new lens through which you can see the world. And I wonder if you have any, and that could also be leveraged, to future career paths and success. So I wonder if you had any advice about how students can optimize their required language study toward future career successes. I know sometimes it's not, you're not even thinking about that yet because they take it in earlier years, but
I mean, I would say just be open, let that language flow over you. Don't look at it as a chore. You got to get that done because you're super young. Experience the world, just plunge into the world. Listen, you don't want to be, stuck in a job at 40 and think, God, everyone looks back, why didn't I appreciate college? All that chance for learning, because you're going to be stuck in something. Hopefully you won't be, but you could be, and you won't be learning anymore. So look at that language as an opportunity. I don't know. If you're taking Spanish or French, find out what is a good movie that was a hit in that country. And now we have Netflix. Watch one of the Netflix series from that country. There's tons of good things. Get into it and let it wash over you. You'll see what happens with your life. But let that language, think of it as a positive thing, an opportunity, a chance, an encounter, a meeting. Don't look at it as, oh God, I got to do these credits so I can get back to what I really want to do. I mean, you're only 22. At 22, you don't know what you want to do. You might. I didn't. But the job you really want is probably going to be at 32, not 22. So you need to be putting in place the skills, and you need to be doing things to make it so that you get that job you want at 32. But right now, your job is to be open to the world and to take the experiences so that you can be the most, open-minded, human, educated. You need to be absorbing the knowledge and the experiences right now.
Absolutely. I hear. I totally agree with that. All right. Well, we've come to the end of our little interview conversation. And we have some questions already in the chat box. So we're just gonna take those. Let's see, what do we have here? How did you make it through the Trump years in Paris? How badly did it hurt the image of the United States?
What's very strange? I was here during George W. Bush and Trump, and I swear to you, more French people disliked Bush than Trump. In fact, there were French people who liked Trump, especially in the beginning. I mean, I think recently now, after what happened at the Capitol, I don't know anyone, but there were people here who really thought during the election that I heard this, that if Hillary Clinton wins, we're gonna have a war. And I don't know, some French are like sort of Russophiles, pro-Russian, and that was the Russian view. So honestly, people laugh about it. They'd say, did you vote for Trump? And they would laugh. I mean, people were always like, oh my God, did you hear what Trump said? So it was taken very lightly. How did I survive? Well, I mean, I didn't have to listen to the US politics every day nonstop, but it was very interesting. But no one ever criticized me because Trump was in office. I felt people disliked George W. Bush back then, but maybe because of the Iraq War fallout than Trump. It was fun.
Interesting.
They're very interested. They've been watching like crazy the election, the impeachment, the riots. I mean, I've been asked to go on French TV about it,
Yeah. Okay, have one. Hello, I'm a graduate student pursuing an MA in French literature, and I flirted with a career in journalism. Were you already working in journalism when you began your MA? If not, how did you begin your career in journalism?
Okay, so that's interesting. So this is, your life will be made of, another thing I want to tell you is you got to follow what you love. It doesn't mean you're going to love everything you do, but you got to follow at least something that you love, because it's what you're going to be good at. And it actually might lead you to something. So no, when I did my master's, I wanted to be a businesswoman who traveled to Europe. The euro was coming in. I wanted to travel to France, and I wanted to do business. And I had not considered ever journalism. So what happened basically, and I said another thing, do something that's important to you. So I think the way I became a journalist was because after undergraduate, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I studied what I loved, which was European history and French. I moved to Washington, D.C. Back then we had no cell phones, we had no internet. We walked around, we pounded the pavement with our resumes. Remember, Claudia?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, and so I remember I signed up with a headhunter. She found me a job. She said, I got you a job. I'm like, great. I was going to be a receptionist at a law firm. And I was like, I don't want to be a receptionist at a law firm because I don't want to be like making reservations and getting coffee for 40-year-old men, you know? And so I told her, I said, I'm not going to take the job. She said, what? She was furious. She said, why? I said, I just can't do it. And so why am I telling you this? Because what did I do? I got a job with my congressman. Now, did I answer phones? Yes, but I also did amazing other stuff, you know, with constituent mail. And I was in the heart of the world's superpower, the Congress. I saw senators in the hall every day and congressmen. I was reading the Washington Post. A whole new political world was opening, and it was just incredible. And I loved that job. And you know what? It felt important. You got to do something that feels important to you. And it can, you know, I'm not saying every single job you have, but that was my first job. And I knew that I could not be that receptionist getting coffee for the 40-year-old lawyers. You know, 40 is now young for me, but whatever. Back then it was old. Anyway, and so I worked in Congress. And here's why I tell you that story. I went to business school with my French. And you know what I discovered? I got out of business school and there was a recession, but I kind of discovered I had some business jobs and came back to France, worked at Euro Disney. I mean, it goes on and on, but I ended up getting fired from a consulting firm job that I had. It was, so we'll call that the business job. And it was very traumatic. I'd worked there for a year and a half. I mean, I was really doing the best, but I don't think it wasn't a match for me, you know? And so here's how I got into journalism. I got fired and I was like, what the heck am I going to do now? And I found this book, said how to get a job in Washington, D.C. And I wrote to TF1 French television, sent my resume. They called me back in 24 hours. And they said, when can you come for an interview? I had never had any journalism experience. Why? Because I spoke French. They needed a producer who could speak to Paris. And because I knew the American political system, it was an election year, and they needed someone who knew American politics, how the system worked, knew Congress, and that was me. And so that's how I got into journalism. And it was in my early 30s. So I was in my early 30s when I pivoted to journalism. And now since I've been a journalist, I've covered many business areas, the Eurozone crisis. So I'm super glad I have, you know, that business degree, but I guess I wasn't the businesswoman that I imagined. And I never imagined being a journalist. And so that's how I got into journalism. So you never know where a road can take you. You cannot, failure can put you in the right place. Do not be afraid of failing. You know, you've got to go for stuff sometimes. And, you know, I told you about that chance in the beginning that I went to Tunisia. You got to put yourself out there sometimes. Take some chances. You know, I'm not saying go risk your life, but if you really want to do something, don't wait for someone to give you permission. You know, go try something. It's worked for me. It's worked for me many times. It's also not worked for me. I won't tell you about my failures. They're embarrassing. But, you know, it worked for me when I made the pivot from being a news producer in a foreign network to radio. I took my vacation and went to Kosovo to visit a friend with radio equipment and literally said, I'm pretending to be a foreign correspondent. I got amazing stories and I had pitched them to the world that takes freelance. And I remember they said, but have you ever done radio? I said, no, but I've done TV. And I ended up having 3 stories on the air because anyway, you never know where something can lead you. So you're getting your master's, good. Meet people, do things, go to events, travel. You never know what you can do with that master's. But no, I didn't even go to journalism school. But I think history is great for journalism. So is French and business. So.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Okay, we have a couple more here. Can you comment on how or if you observed an evolution of how the French view Americans over her years living in the country? Over your years, does it vary by generations of the person, for example?
Yeah, sure. Because I mean, young people in France today are like young Americans, you know, they're all playing video games online together, like young boys, you know. My son will play video games with people all over the world. So there's so many, you know, I pick up the phone and call my mother. There's just, you know, Zoom, FaceTime. So the whole world has been brought together really close. And I feel like Western Europe and the US are very, but still they're not identical. The Europeans realize how European they are when they go to America. So what would I say? I mean, it's evolved, but you still have the older generations, but I find you still have people who love America. I find so many people say to me, I love America. especially if you go to the Normandy region. You just can't imagine. People just, they just come up to you and they just, yeah, I do feel it's a generational thing. And of course, internet has brought the world much closer, but I feel there's a deep respect for America. When I've been here through several presidential elections. When Obama won, people did not like George Bush. When Obama won, I mean, the French just were gaga, and they couldn't believe it. I was up all night working. I finished the night in a bar at like 6 a.m. with some garbage men who were Black. And we were watching Obama, the new president of the United States, who was Black, speak on TV. I'll never forget that moment. And they were like, oh my God, only in America, And I remember some scandals. You guys probably don't remember this, but the head of the IMF, Dominique Strauss-Kahn, was pulled off a plane in America because he had harassed a hotel maid who was Black. And they pulled him off the plane. He was on his way back to Paris and put him in jail in the US. And okay, plenty of French people said, oh, prudes and whatever. And, but there was plenty of taxi drivers who would say to me, Madame, thank God that happened in America. That would have never happened in France because, a powerful politician, nobody's going to touch him. And so people appreciate a lot of stuff. Black Lives Matter spread here very fast. People appreciate a lot about America. I mean, they kind of looked at the QAnon as crazy, and they looked at the Capitol rioters. But I think I think they love America. They appreciate America, not everything about it, but the younger generations are more and more similar. But there's a deep respect, I think, in France for the U.S. among older generations.
Mm-hmm. I didn't want to broach the topic of the Me Too movement because there was some derogatory sort of backlash or commentary from some of the big stars in France, like Catherine Deneuve and
but she got hell for it,
and Brigitte Bardot, and but that's a whole other story. Okay, so here we have another one. Do you see more or less interest from the United States in learning the French language right now? I don't know if you can have your.
Well, I mean, Spanish is the language to learn in the US now. There's so many chances to practice it. I guess maybe it's less because when I was in high school, we could take French, German, Spanish, or Latin. So now, of course, a lot of people are taking Chinese. My own son is taking Chinese. I think fewer people are taking German, obviously. So I guess fewer people are taking French than when I was growing up in the US. But there's still a great desire to learn French. It's still like one of the world's most spoken languages. You've got all of West Africa. You've got North Africa, France, Quebec, and Canada. I mean, I always think you should study the language that you love if you can, because languages are not easy and you got to love it. And so probably less interest, less need, but it's still good. French will still get you far. So if you love French, it doesn't matter that they're not speaking it in the US and people are saying, why don't you take Spanish? Take Spanish if you want to take Spanish. That's great. But, if you want to take French, it's great too.
Okay. And I know because there's a resurgence, of course, in the African.
Oh, is there?
Yeah. I mean, in terms of getting into the world economy, engineers and architects, also from China, but they're either building with China or somehow. And so, I mean, while some of the countries are obviously still have a long way to go till their democratic democratic polities, it is really a big thing. I know a lot of people in Washington, D.C. who work with civil society organizations in North Africa or in West Africa. And we're doing a lot, United States and other countries are doing a lot, other European countries, for example, are doing a lot to help these developing nations. And I've also worked in Morocco, and that's.
Yeah, absolutely. French is a huge UN language in the World Health Organization, all the international organizations, it's huge. And actually an interesting story now is now that Britain has left the EU, I saw this come across the wires the other day. It said, why can't we make French now the language of the EU? Because I guess the EU is in like every language, but people are now why is it English? Because the Brits aren't even here anymore. So yeah, but it's a big French. It punches above its weight in international circles. French does for sure. In the UN, it's huge.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And the Olympics, I mean, you can go on
Yeah.
and on. Okay, can you comment on the mood of the French at this point in the pandemic? My friends, this one says, my friends who live in Normandy are discouraged about lack of the vaccine and everything still being shut down.
Yeah, it's depressing. The vaccine, that was a very slow rollout by the government, coming under heavy criticism because the EU decided to purchase the medicine all together, the vaccine. Usually every country takes care of its health. So they've come together to purchase the vaccine, and it's been slow, especially in comparison to Britain that went fast. Well, Britain had to. They had more than 100,000 deaths, and Boris Johnson botched it. So he's trying to make up for lost time. Yes, it's slow and people are frustrated. People are depressed, and it's true. The restaurants and bars haven't been open since October. We had a lovely summer and we're probably paying the price for it. People, I don't understand why the rate has been so high in France. People have been wearing masks. I'm talking outside, of course, inside, but outside for months, since last summer, since last June. So why did it get so high here? I will say the one thing France has done, which has been amazing, is they've kept the schools open. The schools opened in September and they've stayed open. And that has not been a big spreader. My son wears a mask all day long. They have to wear category 1 masks now. So he has to wear a stronger one. The teachers wear them all day long, and the infections are not coming from that. The infections were coming from restaurants and bars. And that's why I think the US is in such a mess, because we kept the bars and restaurants open and closed the schools. However, it's going to be just a huge economic disaster for everybody. So people are depressed here. People can't stand it anymore. People just want to run screaming into the night, but there's nowhere to go. The whole world is living the same thing, and it's crazy. Yeah. But we feel like I feel like anyway, even though there's been criticism of Macron, I feel like there's an overarching, now with Biden, I think there is too, but like, this is what we're going to do. And, I felt like under Trump, there was just, they ignored it for so long. And then, people here found it so unbelievable that masks were a political statement. I mean, you have plenty of people here who might be right wing, but they never thought that masks were a political statement. And there were maybe just a few people protesting, staying home meant, your freedoms were taken away. People just didn't see it that way, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, we have a long way to go still. Okay, so this person says, speaking of things happening in the US, but not in France until now, and of the Me Too movement, what's your take on the Gabrielle Metzneff scandal? Any insider gossip?
Well, that's incredible that he got it that for so long. Well, the latest thing is it's just the latest thing is about incest. So yeah, Gabrielle Metzneff.
Tell everybody who Gabrielle.
Okay, Gabrielle Metzneff is a writer, and he's a well-known writer, and he's one of the top writers. And he wrote, but for a long time, about his trips to Thailand and the young boys he was with, and he was a pedophile, and in the past, and so he got away with it because he was an artist, a literary genius. Actually, probably they're saying he wasn't even a genius. So there's this sort of, I just did a story on it because there's now a huge scandal. It's related to that because it's about incest, because a woman just came out and said that her stepfather had come into her twin brother's bedroom every night. And the stepfather is this pundit, political scientist who's on TV like all the time, huge, famous guy. And he was like, in his stepson's bedroom. This is 20 years ago, but she wrote a book about it, and everybody believes her because she's a lawyer, and she's like the daughter of the former foreign minister. Anyway, there has been a huge reckoning in France over the past 3 weeks. Me Too incest has exploded the country. There is so much incest. This is horrible, but it's all coming out. Congressmen are coming out saying, I didn't have the courage to speak out. And so it's just bringing all this. So it's just the latest wave of reckoning. And so part of it is that there's these circles of literature and arts that were seen as above the morals, and then it was couched in freedom of sexual expression. This 14-year-old, well, she was consenting. She wanted to have her sexual freedom. No, there's no minimum age of consent in France, and that's about to change too. So basically, if you're 12 and you were raped, you have to prove it. You have to prove you were not consenting. And it is just blowing up right now. People are like, this is it. We are done, So it's a huge thing. So it's about damn time is what I've got to say.
Yeah, good. All right. Well, I think that's a good note to end on here. I want to thank everybody for coming and listening to Ellie, and especially to thank Ellie herself. Wonderful, wonderful stories, and glad you can make some time in your busy schedule to be with us.
It was a pleasure. I really enjoyed it. Thank you for tuning in, guys.
All right.
You.
You can listen to Ellie on NPR. You're mostly on like 6 o'clock news, right? 6 o'clock and
Either in the morning, morning edition, or All Things Considered, usually.
okay, morning edition, all things. So tune her in.
Yeah.
Definitely learn some more stuff about Francophone regions. All right. Well, we were really honored to have you here, Ellie. And
Great to be with you, Claudia.
thanks. Yeah, you too. Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye,
Bonne nuit.
everyone.